Welcome to Starbound. My name's Chikondi, and I'll be your narrator today. Nearly 500 supporters get early access to our stories, including brand new episodes of Sunspire Academy and Frerin and Rimiki. If you'd like to unlock early access and support new episodes and future series, tap Join below to become a Starbound member. Now let's get into today's story. It was the first and only Galactic holiday. It marked the brutal fall of the old Galactic Council and the birth of a new one. For some species, it symbolized a new beginning. For others, it was simply remembered as the day the humans finally snapped. For Elder Zahir, whose role was part spiritual leader, part coming-of-age guide, this day represented his annual speech explaining to the soon-to-be adults what the harvest holiday they had celebrated their whole lives actually meant. The open grass field stretched endlessly beneath the night sky, its purple blades whispering secrets in the gentle breeze. Zahir stood at the center of a wide circle, surrounded by tents that dotted the landscape. Each tent had been erected by the students themselves, a requirement of the ritual. The fabric structures leaned at odd angles, some barely standing, others surprisingly sturdy. It was their first real test of independence, though they believed it merely camping practice. No screens illuminated the darkness, no fires crackled to ward off the chill. The prohibition had been absolute. Technology and flame were forbidden in this sacred place where truth would finally meet innocence. Only the stars provided light. They blazed overhead in their ancient patterns, each point of light a sun, each sun a potential battlefield from wars long past. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a beautiful, terrible scar. Other galaxies wheeled in the distance, faintly visible to eyes evolved for darkness and detail. 50 pairs of orange eyes surrounded him, glowing like ember coins in the darkness. They blinked in unison as Zahir cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the silence. His own orange eyes, dulled slightly with age but still keen, swept across the assembly. Even his sharp vision couldn't penetrate the near-absolute darkness that cloaked his students. Their black feathers merged seamlessly with the night, creating the illusion of disembodied eyes floating in a void. It was fitting for a story about the day order became chaos. The unsettling effect was intentional, of course. Their eyes bobbed as heads turned, seeking comfort in their neighbors. Some eyes drew closer together, friends finding friends in the darkness. Others remained steadfastly alone, too proud or too nervous to seek companionship. Whispers began to ripple through the gathering, mingling with the scent of crushed grass.
Why are we here at night? My wings are getting stiff. Did anyone else notice the military transport that passed overhead?
Do you think this is about the terrorist attack on Valar Station?
Shh! He's about to speak!
The whispers grew louder, curiosity overcoming their reverence. They had been pulled from warm beds, forbidden to fly, their devices and even the comfort of fire. The damp chill of the night air was seeping into their feathers. Questions bubbled up, impossible to contain.
I heard this is about the real history.
My clutch mother said we'd learn the truth when we were ready.
But why can't we use our wings? My flight muscles are cramping.
Zahir raised one wing, a gesture almost invisible under starlight. The whispers died instantly. 50 pairs of eyes focused on him with laser intensity.
Tell me,
he began, his voice carrying across the field.
What do you believe today represents?
Silence greeted his question. A distant night hunter called, its cry lonely and wild, emphasizing their isolation.
For 16 years you have celebrated this day with harvest songs and grain from various worlds. You have danced the spiral dances and given thanks for the abundance of the galaxy.
His voice dropped.
You have been told this is a day of gratitude.
The eyes shifted, uncertain. The breeze rustled the canvas of a nearby tent.
But have you never wondered why your parents' eyes grow distant on this day? Why the adults drink more grain wine than usual? Why the songs, if you listen carefully, sound more like dirges than celebrations."
A few brave souls began to nod before remembering he couldn't see them. The movement of their eyes gave them away regardless.
"Have you never questioned why this is the only holiday celebrated by every species in the galaxy? From the methane-breathing beings of distant moons to the silicon-based life forms in the core worlds. When has the galaxy ever agreed on anything so unanimously?"
He spread both wings, a gesture of encompassment they felt rather than saw.
"You are here tonight because you are old enough for the truth. Innocence, while precious, becomes dangerous when maintained too long. Tomorrow, you will take your places as adults in a galaxy shaped by a single, terrible day."
The silence was absolute now. The wind seemed to hold its breath.
"Today is not the Galactic Harvest Festival."
Each word fell like a stone into still water.
"Today marks the anniversary of the day humanity snapped and erased the old Galactic Council from the face of the galaxy."
Gasps rippled through the gathering. Eyes widened, orange rings expanding in shock. Someone's tent collapsed in the background, the sound sharp as breaking bones.
"The harvest you've celebrated was a harvest of lives. The abundance you've been grateful for was bought with blood, not our blood."
"But," a voice began, strong and clear. Zahir recognized it immediately. Krivar, the unofficial leader among the students.
"You will have your chance to speak, Krivar,"
Zahir said calmly.
"I promise. All your questions will be answered. But first, you must hear the story."
"Then why are we here?" Krivar pressed, his natural authority evident even in the darkness. "Why the field? At night? Why can't we use our wings or our devices? If this is history, why aren't we in a classroom?" Murmurs of agreement rose. It was a fair question.
"Look up,"
he commanded. 50 pairs of eyes turned skyward.
"Do you see the constellation of the avian warrior? There, where her spear points toward the galactic center. That is where the final battle took place. Can you find the Veil Nebula? Behind its faint, ghostly clouds, the first united human fleet gathered in secret. And there, follow my wing. Do you see that dark patch where no stars shine?"
They looked, orange eyes tracking across the sky, their breath misting slightly in the cold air.
"That is where the throne world used to be, before the humans used the first Nova-class ship against their star."
The intake of breath was audible, a collective gasp that seemed to pull the stars closer.
"We are here, in the open, under the night sky, because this is the only classroom vast enough to hold this history. Our planet sits at a privileged position. We can see all the major battle sites from here. Our species evolved with eyes meant for darkness and distance. We can perceive what others cannot."
He gestured again at the sky.
"No projection, no matter how advanced, can capture the scale of what happened. No screen can convey the vast distances across which death traveled faster than light. But here, under these very stars where it all took place, you can begin to understand."
"He's right,"
someone whispered, their voice tight.
"My nest father always said the stars remember."
"Battles happened long ago," added another.
"Maybe the light still hasn't reached us yet."
Zahir nodded, pleased.
"When I tell you how a single species brought the galaxy to its knees, you will be looking at the actual stars where it happened. This is not mere history. This is testimony written in the very sky above us."
He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. A student instinctively shuffled his feet, the sound of his claws sinking into the soft earth barely audible.
"But before I begin," Zahir continued, his voice taking on the cadence of ritual, "you must understand. What you are about to hear will change you. You will not be the same beings tomorrow that you are tonight. The truth, once learned, cannot be unlearned."
He surveyed them one last time, these young souls on the cusp of understanding. Their black feathers remained invisible, but their eyes betrayed everything: fear, excitement, curiosity, dread.
"So I ask you now, before we proceed, are you ready to learn why every species in the galaxy marks this day? Are you prepared to understand why the humans were the ones who finally snapped and said, 'Enough is enough'?"
The response was immediate and overwhelming. "Yes," came the chorus of young voices. Wings rustled as students shifted forward, the collective sound like dry leaves skittering across the ground. Zahir felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders. Every year, this moment arrived. Every year, he watched young minds expand to accommodate terrible realities. But ignorance had nearly destroyed the galaxy once. They deserved to know.
"The old Galactic Council,"
he began, his pacing slow, his claws leaving faint trails in the damp soil,
"was nothing like the voluntary federations you know. There was no charter to sign, no referendum, no choice. Membership was not optional. Every species in this galaxy, discovered or not, willing or not, was considered a member by default. A subject, more accurately."
A student near the front tilted her head, her eyes narrowing.
But how can you be a member of something you don't know exists?
"Exactly,"
Zahir said, pointing a wingtip toward her.
"That was the Council's arrogance. They believed the galaxy belonged to them by right of precedence. They were here first, had the stellar gates, had the power. In their minds, that made every star, planet, and thinking being their property."
He let that sink in. The only sound was the faint, high-pitched hum of a nocturnal insect somewhere in the tall grass.
"And when humanity was discovered,"
he paused,
"humanity's first contact was traumatic. You must first understand what they were before that day. They had spent their entire existence alone, believing themselves unique. They had painfully reached for their own star system with primitive rockets and fragile dreams, writing stories about meeting other life. Some hoped for teachers, others feared invaders. None imagined what actually occurred.
What happened? The question came from multiple voices.
One day, massive ships simply appeared above Earth's major cities. No warning. One moment, the sky was clear. The next, it was filled with vessels the size of mountains, claiming they were now members of the Galactic Council.
The collective intake of breath was audible. Several students instinctively looked up at their own clear, star-filled sky as if imagining it blotted out.
"They must have been terrified,"
someone whispered.
"Terror, yes, but more than that. The dominant feeling was that they had suddenly become slaves. Everything they had built, everything they had achieved, reduced to a number in someone else's database."
"But surely the Council explained,"
Krivar began.
"The Council explained nothing. They demanded. And their first demand was the one that nearly broke humanity. You see, humans had never truly united. They had hundreds of nations and thousands of cultures. Where we see diversity of plumage as beauty, they saw diversity of thought as strength. The Council saw only chaos. They demanded Earth fall under single leadership within one planetary rotation.
1 day?
A shocked voice exclaimed.
They expected an entire species to restructure their civilization in 1 day?
26 Earth hours, to be precise. The Council's representative, a Hassal administrator whose name is thankfully lost, stood before the United Nations of Earth and delivered the ultimatum.
How did the humans react?
A voice piped up from the back.
They nearly destroyed themselves. The Council's demand almost provoked what they would have called World War III.
Gasps echoed through the gathering. A cold wind swept through the field, making several students draw their wings tighter around themselves.
3?
Krivar asked, his voice sharp with disbelief.
They had already fought 2 world wars!
2, long before first contact,
Zahir corrected.
Humanity had a long history of internal conflict. Where most species naturally form collective hierarchies, like our Parliament of Nests, humans seemed designed for division. It was their nature, neither good nor evil, simply different.
He resumed his pacing.
The debates were vicious. Some nations wanted to resist with nuclear weapons. Others argued for compliance, seeing the futility of it. Still others proposed compromise. For 18 hours, Earth teetered on the edge of self-annihilation.
What stopped them?
A child.
The 2 words echoed. Zahir could see the confusion in their glowing orange eyes.
A young human, barely older than you, broadcast a message on their primitive network that united billions. The exact words are lost, but the meaning survives. If we kill each other now, we let them win. Unite today. Survive today. Plan for tomorrow. Simple words, but they resonated. The war was averted by the narrowest of margins.
So they formed a government?
A hollow shell that satisfied the Council's demands while changing little. But it was enough. And that's when they were introduced to the true nature of the Council's rule.
His voice hardened, and the air seemed to grow colder with his words.
Everything was regulated. Commerce between worlds required permits that took decades. Technology sharing was forbidden except through Council channels, and the Council decided what each species was ready for. Even communication was monitored. Want to send a message to another world? Submit it for approval. Want to visit? Apply for a permit that might be granted to your grandchildren.
But how?
Krivar interrupted, skepticism flaring.
How could they control an entire galaxy?
Zahir stopped pacing.
They controlled the gates.
Confusion rippled through the gathering.
What gates?
There was no hyperspace tech at the time,
Zahir explained.
The only faster-than-light method was the gate network. Imagine structures dwarfing moons, each powered by a star. These gates created stable pathways between systems for instant travel across thousands of light years. But you could only travel from gate to gate.
He pointed toward a distant constellation, a faint shimmering cluster.
And only one species knew how to build them, the Hassal. They sat at the very top of the Council, the architect kings of our cage. They invented the tech eons ago and guarded the secret with religious fervor.
But I've never heard of the Hassal,
a student protested.
They are not in any of our history files.
Zahir's laugh was sharp and bitter.
Those at the top tend to fall the hardest, young one. We'll get to that.
He could feel their hunger for the story now.
The decades after first contact were the hardest for humanity. Submission was antithetical to their nature. They had a saying, Give me liberty or give me death. The council gave them neither. It gave them existence without meaning, life without choice.
He paused, his gaze sweeping over the silent, huddled shapes.
It took only 3 years before the first groups that refused council rule began building generational ships. Can you imagine the desperation?
Generational ships? Someone asked.
Vessels designed for sublight travel between stars. Journeys that would take centuries. The first generation would never see the journey's end. Their children would be born in metal corridors, live in recycled air, and die without ever feeling real sunlight on their skins. Their grandchildren might reach a new world.
The weight of that sacrifice pressed down on the students. Several pulled their wings tighter against their bodies, a futile gesture against a chill that was more than physical.
That's how desperately humans wanted freedom,
Zahir continued, his voice soft.
They were willing to condemn their children and grandchildren to live in metal boxes, just for the chance to be free.
But why?
A young female asked, her voice cracking.
Why not just accept council rule? It couldn't have been that bad.
Zahir fixed her with his gaze.
Imagine if tomorrow aliens told us we could no longer fly. Our wings would be bound, our sky taken from us. We would live, but never soar again. Would you accept that life?
The student's feathers ruffled audibly in the stillness.
Never!
Then you begin to understand humanity. Freedom was their sky.
They fell silent, and Zahir continued.
The council didn't think much of it at first. Every species had malcontents. A few thousand humans fleeing in primitive ships. The council saw it as natural selection, the weak removing themselves.
He shook his head.
But the council missed something crucial. These weren't people abandoning their world in defeat. They were pioneers, keeping the flame of independence alive. Each ship carried ideas, technology, and hope. They wanted to build places where they could be free and one day reclaim what they had lost.
One by one, the young avians sat in total silence, their orange eyes fixed on Zahir, unblinking in the starlight.
Centuries passed, Zahir continued. Most generational ships met ugly ends, mechanical failures, resource depletion, cosmic radiation. Space is unforgiving.
He paused, letting them imagine those floating tombs drifting silently between the very stars they now watched.
The council kept careful track. They monitored distress signals and cataloged each failure with dispassionate notes. Human Exile Ship 23 suffered complete life support failure, year 847. No survivors. Human Exile Ship 31 impacted rogue asteroid, year 902. No survivors.
That's horrible,
someone whispered.
But some survived.
The words fell like stones.
A precious few reached empty systems and began new societies. The first successful colony was founded on a world they called Haven. They built cities, created art, and for a brief time knew peace.
How long? Krivar asked, his tone suggesting he suspected the answer.
49 years. Then the council noticed. Under council law, splinter groups were the mother species' responsibility. It was a point of shame. The council pressured Earth to eliminate the colonies.
Pressuring how?
Economic sanctions, technology embargoes. They even threatened to revoke Earth's space access for 1,000 years.
A student spoke up.
So Earth agreed? Earth negotiated. For 3 years, they played the part of the ashamed parent, begging for resources to deal with their wayward children. They needed ships, they argued, weapons, gate access to reach the colonies. How else could they impose council justice?
Understanding began to dawn in the faint glow of their eyes.
And remarkably, the council agreed. They allowed humanity to build its first fleet, primitive by council standards, with basic weapons and shields. They saw it as allowing violent primates to cull their own kind.
Wasn't the council worried?
A quiet student asked.
Why would they be?
Zahir spread his wings.
The council controlled the gates. Humanity wasn't a threat. They were useful tools. Let the humans kill the rebel humans. Problem solved.
He resumed walking among the tents.
Earth's first military fleet launched with council observers watching. The fleet traveled to Haven, and for 2 weeks battles raged. The council received daily reports. Rebel ships destroyed. Defenses eliminated.
And then? Someone prompted.
And then Earth's entire fleet was mysteriously destroyed in what they claimed was a desperate, suicidal counterattack. Every Earthship lost, but not before inflicting severe casualties. The Council observers, watching from a safe distance, saw the explosions, counted the debris, and filed their reports. Mission accomplished, if messily.
Understanding spread like wildfire through the cold night.
The colonies were never truly destroyed,
Krivar stated.
Never. Not once. Each failed mission left the colonies stronger. The battles were real. Earth's forces and the colonists fought, but they fought fairly and didn't target civilians. Technology and supplies would go missing in the chaos.
They were sharing technology,
someone breathed,
using the battles as cover.
For centuries,
Zahir confirmed.
Each generation of Earth warships was more advanced, and each passed those advances to the colonies when its mission failed. The fighting grew fiercer, more deadly, more sophisticated. To the Council, it looked like escalation. In reality, both sides were simply becoming better actors in a deadly play.
He stopped in the center of the circle.
The Council saw incompetence. They saw a species that was so violent, yet for some reason they couldn't even eliminate their own rebels. Report after report filed away. Earth fleet destroyed. Recommend larger fleet. And each time the Council approved. More ships, better weapons, all in the name of order.
How long did this go on?
A student asked.
431 years. Nearly half a millennium of lukewarm battles, faked defeats, and secret technology transfers. Through it all, the colonies grew from a handful of settlements into dozens of worlds. Generations were born free, raised free, thinking free. They developed technologies the Council had never seen because when you control the gates, why innovate?
The silence that followed was profound, broken only by a sudden gust that whipped through the field, flapping the canvas of the tilted tents.
Eventually, the Council grew tired of human failures. In the year 438, they made a decision that sealed their fate. They would slowly expand the gate network to deal with the colonies themselves, no more relying on incompetent humans. But by then, their greatest mistake had been made. Humanity was only decades away from the impossible.
Zahir's voice dropped to a whisper as he paced among the young avians.
You see, the centuries of warfare had done more than transfer technology. They had created a selective pressure unlike any in human history. the smartest, most creative, the most determined. These were the ones who became leaders, and they were all working toward the same goal, even if they didn't know it. He began to pace again. In the year 445, Earth invented the hypercore, a power source that could tap into the fabric of space itself. It was developed in secret labs beneath Earth's oceans. In the year 448, a colony created the relativistic coil gun, a weapon that could accelerate projectiles to 99% of light speed, tested on dead moons. And in the year 450, in a classified system, they completed a project of staggering ambition. A particle accelerator ring around their star, millions of kilometers in circumference, its sole purpose to produce antimatter by the ton. His voice grew reverent. 3 pieces of a puzzle, developed by humans who could only communicate through messages hidden in the debris of staged battles. But each group knew they were part of something larger. The hypercore to power it, the coil gun to deliver it, the antimatter to end it.
And what? A young voice asked, a tremor in it.
Everything.
The word hung in the air, seeming to absorb all sound.
Year 451 was remarkable. The first year of true peace among humans. The fighting stopped, all at once. Earth's latest fleet arrived at a colony to find not battle, but welcome. The colony's leaders invited Earth's commanders to land, to talk.
Zahir's eyes grew distant.
The moment the first Earth officer set foot on free colonial soil, the war ended, just like that. No treaties, no negotiations, just understanding. They were all human. They all wanted the same thing. And now they had the means.
How? Krivar demanded, his form a tense silhouette against the stars. How do you go from centuries of warfare to instant cooperation?
Because the warfare had never been real. Millions had died over the centuries, but as patriots, not enemies. Every Earth soldier knew they might be asked to sacrifice themselves to maintain the deception. Every colonist understood that their death might buy their children's freedom. It was not war. It was the longest, deadliest theater performance in human history.
The magnitude of it stunned even Krivar into silence.
Within days, the pieces came together. Hypercore engineers from Earth traveled by the first true hyperjump to Haven. Together, they journeyed to the antimatter system. There, they built something that should have been impossible.
The Nova-class ship, someone whispered, the name seeming to draw the shadows in closer.
The first one. They called it Prometheus, after a myth about stealing fire from gods. Fitting. They were about to steal fire from the stars, only to give it back, all at once.
Zahir spread his wings wide.
But one ship cannot fight an empire, so they built more. The colonies had been preparing without knowing it. Every world had stockpiled resources. Every settlement had trained engineers. What took years to build the first time took months the second, weeks the third. Within 1 human year, they had a fleet.
How did the Council not notice?
Because the Council was watching the gates. Always the gates. If humanity wanted to attack, they would have to use them. The Council had observers at every gate. They would see an attack coming.
He paused, letting them see the trap the Council had built for itself. The purple grass at their feet seemed to drink the starlight, appearing almost black.
The first united human fleet assembled in the Veil Nebula. Hundreds of ships, carrying the hopes and fury of a species caged for half a millennium. They were farmers and soldiers, scientists and architects, Earthborn and colony-born, united by a single purpose. And being forced to kill themselves for centuries, humanity was not in the mood for mercy. The wind picked up, rustling the grass in a sound like a great, slow exhalation. They knew they would get one chance, one moment of surprise. So they chose their target carefully. Not a military base. That would start a war. Not a colony world. That would make them no better. They chose the one target that would end everything. The throne world, Krivar breathed, his eyes fixed on the starless patch in the sky. The seat of Hassal power, the center of the Gate Network. A world of 20 billion Hassal, the species that had ruled for 50,000 years. Beautiful beyond description, they say. Cities of shining crystal. Oceans that glowed with gentle life. The accumulated culture of millennia. His voice hardened. Gone in less than a minute. The wind died completely. The planet itself seemed to hold its breath. On the day now known as the Snapping, the Prometheus materialized in real space above the throne world. No gate, no warning. The next moment, its main gun had fired. Zahir pointed to the dark patch in the sky. For exactly 3 minutes, the Prometheus hung silent. Then it broadcast a single word on all frequencies, in all languages. Farewell. Several students shivered, ruffling their feathers against a sudden, profound cold. And then the projectile hit the star. A chunk of antimatter the size of a small building accelerated to 99.9% of light speed. His voice dropped to a quiet whisper. When a mass of antimatter strikes a star at near relativistic speed, the kinetic energy released is immense. Then the antimatter reacts with stellar matter, converting mass to energy with perfect efficiency. But that's not the worst part. He paused. The energy released causes fusion to occur outside the stellar core, in layers not meant to burn. The star's delicate balance shatters instantly. The star doesn't just flare, it detonates. A nova, someone said, the word barely audible. An artificial nova. The humans had turned the star itself into a weapon. It was an instant, not enough time to evacuate, not enough time to contemplate. The planet was gone, stone to plasma, scattered in seconds. No one spoke. The weight of 20 billion deaths pressed down on them, heavier than the planet's atmosphere. The entire system was erased. The throne world, its moons, its orbital habitats, its gate, the largest in the network. Millions of years of Hassal civilization, billions of lives. The entire leadership of the Galactic Council, gone. Transformed into an expanding sphere of superheated plasma that would burn for centuries. By the old stars, someone whispered, invoking a prayer that predated the council. That was just the beginning, Zahir continued relentlessly. Across the galaxy, human fleets appeared without warning, in real space above council strongholds. The message was always the same. Surrender your authority or share the Hassal's fate. Most didn't surrender. They didn't believe the new reality. They died fighting ships they couldn't defeat. And those who surrendered? Zahir gestured at the other dark patches. Many crossed the single intergalactic gate and were never seen again. As the silence fell, Zahir continued. Many scholars still debate whether the fall of the old council was a war. Most simply call it an annihilation. In less than a standard week, 50,000 years of oppression ended. The gate network, bereft of Hassal maintenance, began to fail. Within a month, it was useless. It didn't matter anymore.
Because humanity shared the hyperspace technology, Krivar said, understanding flooding his voice.
Freely. The first human diplomatic missions carried not demands but gifts. Hypercore schematics, navigation databases, everything needed to travel the stars without gates, without permission. The cage was not just opened, it was destroyed.
But surely other species feared them, Krivar asked. Tried to restrict them? Zahir's laugh was genuine this time.
Would you try to cage the species that turned stars into pure energy? Would you risk being the next object lesson? No, young one. The galaxy learned that day that freedom was not negotiable. Not for humans, not for anyone. The new order was built on a simple premise: voluntary association or peaceful separation.
He looked at his students, really looked at them. The first hints of dawn were touching the eastern horizon, a faint line of gray against the black. The faintest light began to give their feathered forms a subtle definition.
And here's the strangest part. After demonstrating the peak of destructive capability, humanity became one of the tamest species in the galaxy. Once free, they seemed content to simply talk, to trade, to share. The species forged into the ultimate weapon put it down the moment they were free.
I don't understand,
a young female confessed.
They had the power to rule the galaxy. Why didn't they?
Because that was never what they wanted. They didn't want to rule. They wanted to be left alone, to choose their own path. Once the threat was gone, the forced unity dissolved. Earth's government, no longer needing to pretend, simply announced its dissolution and returned to its chaotic collection of nations.
But they kept the weapons? Someone asked nervously.
The knowledge, yes. The Nova-class ships, all but one were decommissioned. That one patrols the galaxy still, they say, ensuring no new council ever rises.
Questions began flowing like water from a broken dam as the sky slowly lightened, turning from black to a deep indigo.
Are the humans still capable of building such weapons?
What happened to the colonies after the war?
How did the other species react to their freedom? Why don't we learn about the Hassal in school?
Zahir answered them all patiently. Yes, humanity retained the knowledge but had sworn never to build another Nova-class ship unless faced with similar tyranny. The colonies flourished, becoming centers of innovation. Most species experienced a renaissance once free to interact without restrictions. The Hassal were deliberately forgotten. Speaking their name was not forbidden, but it was discouraged. In the distance, the dawn touched the horizon, painting the purple grass with shades of gold and rose. The stars began to fade, their terrible testimony retreating into the day. Their childhood was over. And somewhere among the stars, humanity continued their somewhat peaceful existence, content in their freedom, terrible in their restraint. The galaxy would never forget. It wouldn't dare. Zahir gathered his wings, but one last question came from the growing light, from a voice so young it nearly broke his heart.
Teacher, are we free because of them?
He turned to face the question, seeing 50 young faces for the first time, their black feathers catching the morning light, their orange eyes tired but filled with a new, heavy understanding.
Yes,
he said simply.
We are free because once, long ago, humanity looked at the stars and said, enough. We are free because they paid the price in blood, horror, and shame. and we remain free because we remember."
He began walking toward the settlement, his students following in contemplative silence, their shadows stretching long behind them in the new day's sun.
"That is why we celebrate this day, not to glorify violence, but to remember its cost, not to honor destruction, but to value the peace it purchased. Every species, on every world, under every star knows this truth. We are free because humanity snapped, and we must never give them, or anyone, reason to snap again."
The sun climbed higher, washing the world in light. The lesson was truly over.